Welcome to The Cow Behind the Barn, a podcast exploring humanity, the world, and the divine as experienced and interpreted by an artist. I'm Kevin Caldwell, a co-founder of the Table Collective. Here's my opening thought. There's something wrong. The world I see and the history I read tells me things are painfully and brutally broken. The world, us. But now, like a series that switches to scenes labeled by captions like 3 years ago, ... or when something opens with previously on such and such, let me go back to where I was prior to that opening statement. To things I said in the last episode, previously on Cow Behind the Barn. My journey of seeking to answer the question, where and when did I begin, has opened my eyes to see that empathy, with a big E, in some way stitches everything together. The cosmos and all of us and everything is entangled, pulsing, as it were, in and with and from empathy. But that is not the way we normally experience things. I don't walk around feeling like I'm entangled with trees or the person handing me my receipt at a store. Now, that doesn't mean that it isn't true. I mean, I'm not always aware of breathing, except when something causes me to pay attention. I'm not aware of aging, again, unless something makes me realize it, like getting up off the floor after playing with my grandchildren. Our lack of awareness of breathing and of aging don't mean those things aren't real. And the fact is that the awareness of those two realities can be cultivated, and it could actually be helpful if we do that. It's the same, I think, with the fundamental reality of our natures as entangled, interconnected beings. That reality just is, whether we think about it or not. And if I'm right, then that reality just is, whether we agree with it or not. It's ontological. It's the way things are. And the awareness and experience of that reality is something that we can cultivate. Sometimes we experience it. Most of us can recall times we felt a transcendent connection, a sense of being overwhelmed by beauty or an almost mystical euphoria. And again, this experience, this awareness of our interconnection or entanglement can be cultivated. The contemplative traditions of the world's religious heritages have all developed ways of enabling us to be attentive to this reality of what physics calls entanglement, and religions often speak of as union or interconnection, and which I'm now suggesting is big E, empathy. Where in the cosmos, everything, all things, beings, seen and unseen, when and time and past and present and future, I and we and they and consciousness and big C consciousness, all entangled, interconnected, in union with empathy. That is true ontologically, I'm now convinced. That can be cultivated existentially. It's what we are, and it can be what we experience and how we live. It's taken me 31 episodes to get to the point of articulating things that way, but here I am. And yet, what about my opening comments? Something does seem really wrong, and that raises lots of questions. Perhaps the biggest question, bigger even than the question, where and when did I begin, even bigger perhaps than how did the cosmos come to be, is this big question about what's wrong. That is, for me, the bigger and deeply troubling question. If empathy is the fundamental nature of reality, why is the cosmos so cold and callous and cruel? Why do humans do such terrible things to each other and to animals and to our planet? It's the age-old and intractable question of evil. Now, before I directly tackle that one, there are at least two other questions that have come into my mind while I've been working on these episodes, and they're both related to my conclusions about empathy and in some ways related to the question about evil and what's wrong, though they're related in different ways. There is a trending conversation going on, at least in my country, inspired by the suggestion in some circles, and these are especially Christian circles, that empathy is a problem, or more precisely, that too much empathy is part of the reason our country is in such a shambles. Adherents of this view see empathy not as a solution to the evil of the world, but as part of the evil, part of the problem that needs to be fixed. Proponents of this view refer to it sometimes as the sin of empathy. The other question that has come to mind is related to AI. I'm not one who fears that AI will lead us inevitably to doomsday, let me say that. But given that AI is ultimately the result of the collective pooling of human knowledge, consciousness, and cognition, then whatever it is that makes humans so cruel, whatever might be the fault in our stars, borrowing the title of a very powerful novel and film, all of that's going to be woven into the fabric of AI and whatever we use it to create. For proponents of the sin of empathy, empathy is part of the evil, part of the problem. In the case of AI, it may well propagate the evil that's already somehow part of the cosmos, or at least part of us. And in fact, might propagate it better than humans. I'll take up the bigger question of evil in the next episode. In this session, I'm going to focus first on empathy being part of the problem, and then I'll turn to AI. So what about this idea of the sin of empathy? The whole idea of empathy being a sin has emerged, as I said, primarily within certain Christian circles. I'm not sure what word I would use to describe my reaction to that. Ironic? Sad? Disappointing? Scary? Granted, it's not a widely accepted concept, and it may be that the phrase itself, sin of empathy, is used more as a way to attract attention or spark a discussion, something provocative, catchy. Regardless, the point of view represented in the phrase is presenting a challenge to traditional notions of empathy and compassion as inherently good things. I said the conversation seems to primarily take place within some Christian circles, but the origins are inspired by the work of Edwin Friedman, a therapist and a rabbi. Friedman was one of the early framers of family systems theory, and in his book, A Failure of Nerve, he includes a chapter titled The Fallacy of Empathy. Now, Friedman's focus is on unhealthy expressions of empathy. Expressing his viewpoints in my own words, here's some examples of what he would see, and I as well would see, as unhealthy examples of empathy. Loss of boundaries. In other words, becoming enmeshed in another person to the extent that one's own self disappears. Codependence, leading to over-functioning, overcompensating, perhaps, trying so hard to help or even fix something or someone that we, again, lose ourselves. And then another one, numbing and avoidance, making any type of pain equivalent to harm. And so pain ends up needing to be avoided. Our own pain, the pain of others, and helping others avoid pain. And that can devolve to unhealthy versions of this, such as any sort of distress needs to be fixed, avoided, eliminated. These all seem to be rooted in abuses of empathy or unhealthy expressions of empathy, and if that were the only argument being made against empathy, it would be an easy thing for me to conclude this discussion and move on, because I agree, these are unhealthy. In fact, were this the only concern, I don't think I would have even included the topic. What concerns me, though, is not that some say we need to be careful to avoid unhealthy expressions of empathy. What concerns me is that there seems to be a more fundamental criticism of empathy at the level of values and virtue, a point of view that sees empathy as part of what some Christians, at least, have called a false gospel of kindness. Now, in the American context, it's also become a political issue. And here I will make a generalization with the full realization that every generalization contains truth, but also breaks down when one encounters the nuances of a generalization in the form of an actual specific individual human being. But the generalization is this, that the sin of empathy criticism is largely living within an environment that combines political conservatism and Christianity. Thus, it's largely a product of Republican Christians, among whom the concerns seem to include the worry that empathy leads to caring for people who should be taking care of themselves, and thus to so-called liberal social programs for the poor, unhoused, immigrants, and minorities. Recent attacks on DEI can be traced to this approach, I think. Since empathy is seen by some in this camp to represent weakness, the sin of empathy viewpoint seems to me to be motivated, at least in part, by a desire to affirm values that are rooted in the goodness, so to speak, of power and control. My point actually is not a critique of republicanism per se, because I don't think these two things are inherently related. And it's not a critique of Christianity either, or even of these Christians. It is, however, a critique of how some are currently melding these two and then turning around to also find fault with advocating empathy as a crucial value. What I mean is that they're finding fault with those who advocate that empathy should be a crucial value. Now, having said all that, let me wrap this section up by first affirming that raising concerns about potentially unhealthy empathy is important. And if that were all that the sin of empathy conversation is seeking, I would applaud it. But I think there's something more. There's what I would call a virus in the machine. The way I have presented empathy in previous episodes grounds it in ultimate reality, and thus in a deeper soil than just the existential questions of empathy as an ethical question, which is where the whole conversation about the sin of empathy really resides. But if empathy is ontological and woven into the very fabric of reality, then to not cultivate empathy existentially will eventually result in a profound disconnection and estrangement within our own identity as human beings, akin to a sort of psychic computer virus that eventually shuts down the machine. Here I'm going to present a poem which is in some ways an exploration of the psychological interior dynamics of what happens when we don't engage empathy, the resulting consequences relationally between us and other human beings. I've shared it before, but it's been a while. It's a poem I called Eclipses. Eclipses. Planets come between each other, touzle-headed playground waifs jostling for the front of the line. There are patterns. Rare, an event marked on calendars making headlines in between news of sunken boats of refugees, the kidnapped child, 2 actors, PDA. Every dawn, the moon, ignored and alone, shunned to the backside of the demanding earth. Every downing of the sun, earth, clamored and abused, relegated to the silence when the moon claims the light. Moon, you seem oblivious. Even pushed behind you, the missing sun is the point of all this, and returns to shame you back into your corner, nursing your embarrassed wound, the eyes of everyone shifting, the sun sucking all the air out of your room. Sitting at coffee with friends, our words are in orbit, awaiting the brief shimmering tick of time when we shine at the center, our slender moments not in the sun, but to be the sun. Stirring my cup, smiling, nodding, I have one eye on the solar system. I time every turn of phrase among us. I'm desperately afraid to miss my entry, bounce back into space, unheard, alone. My body postures to everyone my sincere attentiveness, while I conjure a moon of words to fill the space between us. Yesterday I looked hard at a picture of an eclipse, a dark center, the moon, a thriving, irrepressible envelopment of fire circling all around it, the sun, and I saw, I, you, we, them, wanting to be but never being, the sun. I saw that we, I, can be moon and earth. Moon shimmers, speckled in silver mists, painted by a tender, feathered fingerprint,
Moon reflects. Earth swims, greened in yellow rain, warmed like a sown seed in humus-rich soil. Earth grows. Sun sits, a lover, impassioned, in heat, burning in all directions. Sun waits, for earth is turning and moon circling, cycling time and again into the embrace of the inflamed, unceasing, verdant center, uneclipsed.
Now, coming back to the question of healthy versus unhealthy empathy, the religious traditions we have looked at provide wisdom, actually, for the cultivation of healthy empathy and for facing and curing, as it were, the dynamic described in the poem. I'm thinking, for example, of Jesus' teaching, love your neighbor as yourself, which he applied even to enemies and to people of ethnic heritages with whom there may be long-standing hatred, for example, in his story of the Good Samaritan. I'm also thinking of the 4 Brahma-viharas in Buddha's teaching, which roots empathy as one of 4 qualities to be cultivated and which grounds all 4 in the reality that we are interconnected with all others and with all things. Both of these examples actually lead to seeking what is good for each of us and for all of us collectively. I'll transition from the reminder of the ontological reality of empathy to the question of AI. What about AI? I'm, of course, not the first one to say that it seems like we're on the precipice of a future in which AI is going to take on, or indeed is already taking on, almost godlike qualities as we develop human-engineered intelligence and even human-engineered life. The technology baselines driving such changes seem to get reset every day. Many who work in the field of AI are suggesting that we will reach the singularity soon. That's the point at which the intelligence of machines, so to speak, surpasses that of humans. Most say that'll take place within a few decades. Some are saying in less than 1 decade. Every technology we rely on for what seems to be emerging as our primary medium of human connection, by that I mean social media, is AI-driven. So are innovations in agriculture, industry, and much more, including the increasing use of AI in the creative arts. The computer revolution, which seems already, in my view, on the verge of going the way of the rotary phone, was embedded in the machine learning revolution. And the machine learning revolution, and with it AI in its earliest expressions, was enabled by our ability to mimic and learn from and apply to new technologies various biological designs, biology that had developed over billions of years and now can be re-engineered rapidly. Now, there are really good things about this. For example, instead of healthcare based on population averages, we're moving toward a world where treatment is based on who we are as individuals, on a discrete molecular level of who you and I are. That requires data, a lot of data about you and about me, which will make healthcare far more precise. It will enable the development of drugs that are more tailored to your or my genetic makeup. These developments will also potentially enable medicine to shift to more preventive strategies and methods, because the influx of data and the ability to mine it effectively will enable medical professionals to identify patterns. These are all good things. I've only focused on medicine and healthcare, but similar developments in other fields could be added. But you're probably aware and sensing that I'm going to get to another side of the coin with AI. Before I say more, I just want to repeat, I am not anti-AI. Apart from the rapid pace of changes with AI and apart from the scale and scope of the side effects, as it were, AI is like every other technological development. Going back to fire and the wheel, the potential for good and the potential for harm largely depend on human users. And that's the main point I'm going to make here. Or there's 2 related points, but that's a big one. But first, let me look at agriculture. I want to talk about unintended side effects of AI, and let me talk first about agriculture. One reason for the dramatic population growth of the past 100 years, actually several thousand years, but most dramatically in the past 100, has been developments in our ability to grow food for more people, many more people. Of course, other developments have also assisted in population growth, but let me just focus on agriculture. More recently, AI has been an asset in agriculture in many of the same ways I described for healthcare, especially its biological applications. The problem is that if we try to continue to scale the capacity of agriculture to feed more and more and more, and the population is anticipated to grow to as many as 10 billion people in the foreseeable future, it's going to require us to utilize all of our empty wild spaces, which will inflict side effects upon the environment that we can't anticipate and likely won't be able to reverse. Now, it's possible, of course, that advances in biotechnology can keep up with all of that and will enable us to mitigate the unforeseen side effects that I'm citing. I mean, maybe, but maybe not. My agriculture example is really intended as an example of how almost everything we do technologically has potential butterfly effects, in this case, unintended consequences and side effects, and in this case, not good ones. In episode 1, I focused on the positive aspects of butterfly effects, and I do still believe in those. But every technology also has, at least potentially, the dark side of that dynamic of unintended consequences. Now, obviously, that applies to a lot of life, not just technology and not just AI. I'm sure there will be unintended side effects of this podcast. Maybe this episode, perhaps this very section, maybe this sentence. What does this have to do with consciousness and empathy and with the problem of evil that I said AI is in some ways connected with? And that's going to bring me here to my second point, which is really the bigger concern that I have. So far, I have focused on the effects of AI, the outputs, you might say, like in agriculture, its uses in healthcare, etc. But AI did not emerge out of thin air. There are inputs to AI. Those inputs are not neutral or amoral. They're not objective things and facts. Data actually is never purely objective. There's a familiar adage, garbage in and garbage out. I know that the ethicists that I have come across who are wrestling with the matter of ethics in AI are all in agreement that we need to be careful and there needs to be values. In fact, one I came across even repeated that multiple times. There needs to be values, values, values. But that raises the question, from where will we draw those values? And of course, even if we agree on a source of values, and even if it is the right source of values, if we're honest, aren't we all aware that we act and think and feel in ways that are not in keeping with our values? And that, right there, that point about us surfaces the thing I'm trying to get at here. Given that much of what goes into the cosmic data pool of AI is like a cognitive blood donation drawn and collected from humanity's veins, at least our cognitive veins, isn't it inevitable that the AI cognitive gene pool will be contaminated, as it were, by our samples, our character flaws, our ability to lie to ourselves, the cruelty that is so prevalent throughout human history, our self-preservation, our racism, genderism, sexism, ageism, nationalism, intolerance, and on and on. You can add to my list. Make your own list. With AI, are we just generating a bigger, faster, more efficient version of ourselves? Especially when and if the singularity arrives and AI becomes more intelligent than we are. It's like Frankenstein's monster, but on a scale and speed we can't imagine and can't control. Now, earlier I mentioned in passing that AI is driving the way social media works, and social media is increasingly a primary means of human connection, to use that term very loosely. I recently worked on a project in which I wrote 15 songs. Each of them were 15 seconds long, all exploring the good, the bad, and the ugly of social media. I release them all separately in TikTok and Instagram and on my YouTube channel, which, by the way, is Kevin Caldwell Music. And I then compile them into one song with all 15 sections and a 15-second introduction. So 16 15-second pieces, all in one. I'm going to include it here. It seems fitting as an artist's way of trying to reflect on how we as humans can face the shadow sides of AI, at least in this arena of human connection, and I'll say a bit more about its potential applications after the song. But here's my work, Life in 15 Seconds. This album is 15 songs, each 15 seconds long, trying to fit within the framework of a certain social media platform that tells us our lives need to be told in stories 15 seconds long.
15 seconds, the clock is ticking. A window into a tiny part of me. Truth is that maybe 15 seconds is all that you'll want to see of me. 15 seconds of glory, or 15 seconds of shame. What's the point of telling your stories if nobody knows your name? If nobody knows your name. Sometimes dawn floats down like lace. Sunlight wraps round my fingers. I scroll the 15 second stories of friends, wishing I had more time here to linger. Me inside my story, all of you inside of yours, melded into one another. Pieces of the metaverse, and now we're searching for our way home. A reel of mine went viral, one I made way back when, but I'm not that man today, not who I was way back then. But no one wants a real me, they just want that reel again and again. 15-story building, she has climbed them all. How could someone's 15-second story make her wanna fall? Suburb full of model homes, lost within conformity, identical and all alone, punish individuality. I'm here inside my bedroom window, nursing dreams of flying. Fun scrolling, dumb scrolling, slum scrolling, numb scrolling. Soon I'll be done, wait not yet. Scrolling, numb, scrolling, numb, scrolling, numb. Mama, my thumb's in a cast, my eyes super glued to the screen of that last nasty thing that I just viewed. In the end, I can only conclude I'm social medially screwed. We're all trapped and wrapped inside the algorithm's prison. Thumb scrolling, numb and drunk upon the metaverse's poison. Will emojis, likes and follows really be the reason to drink the Kool-Aid? I log in to watch somebody else feel the things I wish I could have felt. The bots will chat more the more I'm paying. I'm not in the game, not really playing. All alone here in the stands, a lonely, only fan. Door that lets the monsters in won't let me send them out again. Today I've decided to begin and give names to all of them. Try to turn them into friends, so go ahead, send the monsters in. There's a love that's deeper than the universe, that can heal the ancient curse, heal even me. From my heart to my hands, to my phone, to your phone, to your hands, to your heart. From your heart to your hands, to your phone, to my phone, to my hands, to my heart. From my heart to my hands, to my phone, to your phone. Today I opened the list of all my followers, said each and every name out loud, to embrace you in the sound of a tender human voice.
Now, I know that project only addresses the social media application of AI, but I think it's possible that those songs contain seeds that could suggest ways to counter at least some of the potential negative effects of garbage in and garbage out. Or perhaps at least they contain the seeds for recycling the garbage. If nothing else, cultivating self-awareness and facing our monsters are crucial. And that is a theme woven throughout those different pieces. Well, I've looked at the sin of empathy, and I've looked a bit at some of my concerns about AI, and now I want to get ready to turn back to the big question that I opened with. If empathy is an ontological ingredient in reality, and in particular in the divine, and thus is our fundamental and essential nature as well, then why is the world so bloody and broken, and why are human beings capable of such cruelty, capable of inflicting such pain on each other? I've expressed my concerns about how we might infect AI with our virus, but my question now is, why is that capacity within us to begin with, so that it's even possible for it to infect AI? So that gets me to that intractable question of, if this is the way we are, if empathy is truly reality, why is everything so messed up? And that's now the destination to which I need to go next time.